The man I married has been dead for 16 years. Whoever thought a simple coffee run on a rainy Seattle morning would shatter the careful life I'd built over the last 16 years? But there he was, standing in line at my favorite cafe, looking older but still so heartbreakingly familiar. His dark hair had a few grays now, and those blue eyes, God, those eyes that used to make me feel like the only person in the world, locked onto mine. My heart stopped. It was him. Julien. The man I thought I'd lost forever in that terrible storm off the coast of France. The one whose memory haunted every quiet moment of my life. And in that instant, it's all coming back to me now, the passion, the pain, the love that nearly destroyed us both. My name is Sophia Reynolds, and at 38, I'm a high school English teacher who spends her days inspiring kids with stories of Shakespeare and Austen, while my own story feels like a half-finished tragedy. I live alone in a small apartment overlooking Green Lake Park, where the constant drizzle matches my mood on bad days. The place is cozy but cluttered, with stacks of books piled on every surface, grading papers scattered across the kitchen table, and my cat Luna curled up on the worn couch. The walls are painted a soft cream color, decorated with framed quotes from my favorite authors and a few photographs from happier times, though none from Paris. Those I keep hidden in a box beneath my bed, too painful to display but too precious to throw away. I volunteer at the local library on weekends, helping with reading programs for kids, because it gives me a sense of purpose beyond the classroom. The children's laughter fills something hollow inside me, their excitement over picture books reminding me why stories matter. Mrs. Chen, the head librarian, always says I have a gift with the shy ones, the kids who hide behind their parents' legs. Maybe it's because I understand what it feels like to want to disappear sometimes. My days are filled with lesson plans, parent-teacher conferences, and the occasional staff meeting where we debate the merits of modern literature versus the classics. I always argue for the classics. There's something about the timeless nature of human emotion that speaks to me. Love, loss, redemption, these themes echo through centuries because they're universal truths. But underneath it all, I've been trying to rebuild my life after a painful divorce 5 years ago. Mark was a good man, steady and reliable, an accountant who balanced our checkbook and never forgot to take out the trash. But our marriage crumbled because I couldn't let him in fully. The walls I'd built were too high, forged from the grief of losing Julien. Those walls weren't constructed overnight. They rose brick by brick, year by year, as I convinced myself that loving deeply was a luxury I couldn't afford. Mark deserved better than a wife who flinched when he said, "I love you," who kept her heart locked away like a precious artifact too fragile for daily use. Our divorce was quiet, civilized. We divided our possessions with the detachment of business partners dissolving a company. He kept the house in Bellevue with its perfect lawn and matching furniture. I kept my books, my records, and my solitude. Now, my goal is to find inner peace, to maybe open my heart again without the constant fear that love will slip away like sand through my fingers. I see a therapist every other week, a kind woman named Dr. Harlan who helps me unpack the baggage I've carried since I was 22. She has silver hair and gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and her office smells like lavender and old books. She encourages me to journal, to meditate, but some nights, when the rain taps against my window like insistent fingers, I turn to my collection of old vinyl records instead. My record collection is my secret sanctuary, rows of albums arranged chronologically on wooden shelves I built myself. Each one tells a story, blues from the 40s, jazz from the 50s, rock ballads from every decade since. But it's the love songs that call to me in the dark hours. Classic melodies that transport me back in time, voices that understand heartbreak in ways modern music can't seem to capture. I play them softly, singing along with a voice that's raw and soulful, though I rarely share it with anyone. It's my private ritual, a way to feel without falling apart. My singing voice is something I've always been self-conscious about. In high school, the choir director begged me to audition for solos, but I preferred the safety of blending in with the group. Only Julien ever heard me sing freely, without reservation. On lazy Sunday mornings in his tiny Paris apartment, I'd hum while making coffee, and he'd stop whatever he was doing just to listen. "Your voice has stories in it," he used to say, which made no sense then but feels profound now. That morning started like any other, mundane and predictable, the kind of routine that keeps me grounded. I woke up to the sound of my alarm buzzing at 6:30 a.m., the gray light filtering through my curtains. The Seattle sky was its usual canvas of clouds, promising rain before noon. Luna stretched lazily on the bed, her orange fur catching what little light crept through the window. She's been my companion for 3 years now, a rescue cat with mismatched eyes, one blue, one green, that somehow mirror my own sense of being caught between worlds. I brewed coffee in my tiny kitchen, the aroma filling the air and mixing with the faint scent of lavender from the candle I'd burned the night before. The kitchen is barely large enough for one person, with white cabinets that have seen better days and a refrigerator covered in student artwork and grocery lists. But it's mine, and there's comfort in that ownership, in the way the morning light hits the small window above the sink just right. I dressed quickly, jeans, a soft blue sweater that brings out my eyes, sensible boots for the wet streets, and grabbed my umbrella before heading out. The park across the street was shrouded in mist, joggers blurring into shadows as they ran their loops around the lake. An elderly man fed ducks from a bench, his movements slow and deliberate. A young mother pushed a stroller, her toddler babbling happily despite the drizzle. These small scenes of normal life always comfort me, reminders that the world keeps turning regardless of individual heartbreak. I walked the 3 blocks to the cafe, my mind already drifting to the day's lessons on Romeo and Juliet. How ironic, teaching young hearts about star-crossed lovers when my own history felt like a cautionary tale. My students always asked the same questions. Why didn't Juliet just run away? Why did they have to die? I'd explain dramatic necessity, tragic flaws, the literary tradition of doomed love. But secretly, I wondered if Shakespeare knew something about love that I was still learning, that some connections transcend logic, time, even death itself. The cafe was bustling, as always, with the hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. The air was warm and inviting, scented with fresh ground coffee beans and baked goods, cinnamon rolls glazing under the display case, muffins dotted with blueberries, croissants that reminded me painfully of Paris mornings. I loved this place for its lived-in comfort, mismatched chairs, local artwork on brick walls, the way the baristas remembered everyone's usual order. It felt like community, something I'd been craving without realizing it. I joined the line behind a businessman checking his phone and a college student with textbooks spilling from her bag. The familiar routine soothed me: order my medium dark roast with cream, grab a seat by the window if available, grade papers or read while savoring the richness. But today, something felt different. The air seemed charged, like the moments before lightning strikes. I scrolled through my phone to check emails from students, half listening to the barista calling out orders like latte for Emily and cappuccino for Jake. Mrs. Peterson had emailed about her daughter's missing assignment. Tommy Rodriguez wanted to discuss his essay on Hamlet. Normal teacher concerns that would usually occupy my thoughts completely. Then I heard it, a voice that cut through the noise like a knife. Double espresso, please. Deep, resonant, with that subtle French lilt that I'd replayed in my dreams for years. My head snapped up, and there he was. Julien. Taller than I remembered, his frame lean and strong under a simple wool coat. His hair was shorter now, peppered with silver at the temples, but those eyes, piercing blue, framed by faint crow's feet, were unchanged. Time had refined him rather than diminished him, adding character to the boyish face I'd known. He wore dark jeans and boots that suggested he still walked everywhere when possible. His hands, I'd know those hands anywhere, were slightly weathered now, with small scars I didn't recognize. Working hands. Building hands. The gold band he used to wear was gone, leaving only a thin line of pale skin. He turned slightly, as if sensing my stare, and our gazes locked. The world tilted. The cafe's noise faded to a whisper. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor, but I barely noticed. Time collapsed. I was 22 again, standing in a Parisian bookshop where he'd first sketched my profile, claiming the afternoon light made my eyes look like captured storm clouds. Julien? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the grinder's whir. He froze, his face draining of color. For a moment, he looked like he might run. Then something shifted, and the man I'd loved with desperate intensity was staring back at me across 16 years of separation. "Sophia, mon Dieu, is it really you?" His words were soft, laced with disbelief and something deeper, regret, perhaps, or longing. We stepped out of line together, the other customers fading into a blur. I bent to pick up my phone, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it again. He moved to help, our fingers brushing as we both reached for it. The contact sent electricity shooting through me, muscle memory awakening after years of dormancy. We moved to the side, near the window where rain pattered against the glass like tears. Up close, I could see the changes time had wrought, a small scar above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before, tiny lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and sorrow in equal measure, the way his shoulders carried a weight I didn't remember. But he was still devastatingly beautiful, still the man who'd made me believe in fairy tales. He smelled faintly of sandalwood and rain, a scent that yanked me back to Paris instantly. Memory flooded me, lazy mornings when that scent would cling to his pillow, afternoons when he'd pull me close and I'd breathe him in like he was oxygen itself. "I thought you were dead," I said, my voice cracking as tears welled up unbidden. "They said you drowned." The Coast Guard searched for days. I searched. "God, Julien, I mourned you. I went to your funeral." His face crumpled with pain. He reached out, hesitating before his hand touched my arm, the contact sending a jolt through me like electricity. "I almost was," he replied, his accent thicker now, as if emotion had pulled it to the surface. "The storm, the waves pulled me under. I fought, Sophia, I fought so hard. But I washed up miles away, hurt and alone. When I woke up in that hospital, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and memories of you screaming my name as the water took me. I remembered that scream, how it had torn my throat raw. How I'd thrashed against the fisherman who'd pulled me from the water, desperate to dive back in and find him. My family, they had enemies, debts from my father's business. Dangerous people. If I came back, if I contacted you, it would have put you in harm's way. So I vanished. Started over in Italy as Julien Moreau. Became an architect, building homes to forget the one I lost. But I never forgot you. Not for a day." His words crashed over me like the waves from that fateful night. I remembered it all too vividly now, the yacht trip his family had insisted on, celebration off the Normandy coast. His father had just closed some business deal that was supposed to solve their financial problems. The sky had been clear at first, the sea calm as we laughed and toasted with cheap champagne that tasted like possibility. Julien had sketched me on the deck, his pencil flying across the page, capturing my smile, the way the wind played with my hair. "I want to remember this moment forever," he'd said. The irony wasn't lost on me now, that drawing had been lost to the sea along with everything else. But then the storm rolled in, sudden and furious. Thunder boomed like cannon fire, lightning splitting the sky. The yacht's captain had tried to make for shore, but the waves rose like monsters, slamming into the boat with terrifying force. I clung to Julien, his arms around me as the world upended. The boat pitched and rolled, sending us sliding across the deck. "Stay with me," he'd shouted over the wind. "Whatever happens, stay with me." But the sea had other plans. Cold water swallowed us, salt burning my lungs. I screamed his name until my voice gave out, reaching for him in the churning darkness. When I woke on the shore, wrapped in a fisherman's blanket, they told me he was gone. Lost to the sea. 3 others from the boat had died, his cousin Michel, the captain, a family friend whose name I'd forgotten. But Julien's body was never found. I stayed in France for weeks, searching hospitals, beaches, morgues, anywhere there might be news. I haunted the coastline like a ghost myself, hoping against hope. The French authorities were kind but realistic. The sea doesn't always give back what it takes, mademoiselle. Eventually, grief won. I flew home, a shell of myself, carrying survivor's guilt like a stone in my chest. That loss defined me, made me cautious, walled off. I threw myself into graduate school, then teaching, building a life based on routine and safety. I married Mark because he was safe, a methodical accountant who planned everything down to our weekly grocery lists. But safety isn't love, and our divorce was mutual, quiet, leaving me even more alone. Now, here Julien was, alive and real, stirring my untouched coffee as we sat at a corner table. The cafe's wooden chairs creaked under us, and the steam from our cups rose like ghosts between us. We talked for what felt like minutes but must have been hours. I called in sick to work, something I never did, my voice shaky as I lied to the principal about a migraine. "I need to know everything," I said, wrapping my hands around my mug for warmth. 16 years, Julien. How do you just disappear for 16 years? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered well. The hospital in Calais, they saved my life, but I had no identification. My wallet, everything, lost in the storm. When I finally remembered who I was, the nurses told me about the others who died, about the search being called off. I realized this was my chance to escape. Escape what? His jaw tightened. My father's business wasn't just importing wine, Sophia. There were other deals, darker ones. Men who didn't accept payment plans or forgiveness. After the accident, they came looking for me, for any remaining family members to settle debts. If they'd known I survived. So you became someone else. Julien Moreau. A man with no past, no debts, no dangerous family history. I moved to Tuscany, learned to build instead of destroy. Every stone I laid, every foundation I poured, was an attempt to create something lasting, something that couldn't be taken away by storms or violence. I studied his face, looking for traces of the boy I'd loved. "Were you happy?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I existed. I built beautiful things, won awards, made money. I even..." He paused, and I saw shame flicker across his features. "I even married someone. Anna. A kind woman who deserved better than a man haunted by ghosts." Jealousy struck like a physical blow, irrational after all these years. "What happened?" "She left me 3 years ago. Said I never really let her in, that I was always somewhere else in my mind. She was right. I was here, with you, every day." We sat in silence, processing the weight of lost years. Around us, the cafe had emptied and filled again, the lunch crowd replacing the morning regulars. Neither of us had touched our food. "I saw your name in a local paper," he said finally. "You won an award for teaching. Educator of the Year for bringing classics to life. It felt like fate, Sophia. I had to come. How long have you been watching me?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "I'm not a stalker," he said quickly. "I arrived yesterday, spent hours walking around the neighborhood, trying to work up the courage to approach you. This morning was chance. Or destiny. I don't know the difference anymore." As we spoke, memories flooded back in waves. Our summer in Paris, me, a wide-eyed 22-year-old studying literature abroad through a program at the Sorbonne, him a 24-year-old aspiring architect sketching in cafes to earn money for art supplies. We'd met by chance near the Seine, where I'd been reading Neruda and he'd been drawing the light on the water. I tripped over his easel while rushing to catch a bus, sending his sketches scattering in the wind. He caught me, laughing, and that was it. The beginning of everything. We spent the rest of the day chasing his drawings down the embankment, talking about art and literature, about dreams that felt too big for our young bodies to contain. Nights wandering the streets, hand in hand, the Eiffel Tower glittering like a promise. Kisses that tasted of croissants and coffee, whispers of forever in broken languages, his English improving daily, my French embarrassingly clumsy but enthusiastic. His family was complicated, wealthy but shadowed by debts from failed investments, whispers of shady deals to keep their import business afloat. But with me, he was free, vulnerable, young. "Remember when we danced in the rain by Notre Dame?" he asked now, a small smile tugging at his lips. I nodded, throat tight. How could I forget? We'd been caught in a sudden summer storm, ducking under the cathedral's eaves with dozens of other tourists. But as the rain intensified, he'd pulled me back out into the downpour, spinning me around the empty courtyard while I laughed and protested. "You said storms couldn't touch us," I whispered. "I believe that," he said simply. I was young and stupid and so in love it hurt to breathe sometimes. The irony bit deep. The very storm we defied in our arrogance had ultimately torn us apart. The cafe emptied around us, baristas wiping counters and stacking chairs, but we lingered, bridging years with stories. He told me about his first architectural project, a small chapel in Tuscany that took him 3 years to complete. "Every arch reminded me of your back when you'd stretch in bed," he said, making me blush. "Every window placement was designed to catch light the way it used to catch in your hair." I shared pieces of my life too, the loneliness of my marriage, the way teaching gave me purpose, the records I collected like a shrine to the past. Hope flickered in my chest, fragile as a candle flame. Maybe this was our second chance, a redemption after so much loss. But doubt whispered too. Why hadn't he tried harder to find me? Was this real, or just a cruel dream I'd wake up from? "I have to ask," I said finally, gathering courage. "In 16 years, you never once tried to contact me? Never wondered if I was safe, if I was okay?" Pain flashed across his face. "I tried once. 5 years after the accident, I hired a private investigator. He found your wedding announcement in the paper. To Mark. You looked happy. Radiant. I decided you were better off without the ghost of me haunting your new life." My wedding. I remembered that photo, Mark beaming beside me while I smiled with determined brightness, trying to convince myself and everyone else that this was what happiness looked like. "I wasn't happy," I whispered. "I was surviving. I know that now. But then. I thought I'd lost my right to complicate your peace." That night, back in my apartment, the rain intensified, drumming on the roof like an urgent heartbeat. Luna purred on my lap as I sat on the couch, staring at the wall where my life felt suddenly rearranged like furniture in an earthquake. Everything looked the same but felt completely different. I pulled out my vinyl collection, fingers tracing the worn covers until I found it, the album we played on repeat during those Paris afternoons. I placed the needle carefully, and as the opening notes filled the room, tears streamed down my face. The song wrapped around me like arms, every note a memory. There were nights when the wind was so cold that my body froze in bed if I just listened to it right outside the window. It was our song, played on repeat during lazy afternoons in his tiny 6th-floor walk-up in the Marais. The building had been old even then, with narrow stairs and walls so thin we could hear our neighbors' conversations. But his studio apartment had been our sanctuary. Unmade bed, easels everywhere, sketches of me pinned to every surface like love letters written in charcoal. Now, the melody echoed the turmoil inside me, the joy of reunion mixed with the ache of years lost. I sang along softly, my voice breaking on the chorus, letting the emotion pour out. "But when you touch me like this, and you hold me like that, it's all coming back to me now." Luna meowed, disturbed by my tears, and I pulled her closer. "What do I do, baby?" I asked her mismatched eyes. "How do you trust someone who's been dead for 16 years? I texted my best friend Rose. "You won't believe who I saw today. Julien. Alive." My phone rang before I could set it down. "Girl, are you serious?" Rose exclaimed, her voice a mix of excitement and caution. "The Julien? From Paris? Holy crap, sophomore. Are you okay? Are you having a breakdown? Should I come over?" Rose had been my anchor since college, the friend who'd held my hair back during freshman year hangovers and held my hand through every crisis since. She's 37, a powerhouse marketing executive with a sleek downtown condo and a husband who worships her. But lately, her texts had been different, shorter, with forced cheer that I recognized because I'd perfected the same mask. "I'm not having a breakdown," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. He was in the coffee shop. We talked for hours. "Rose, he never died. He's been in Italy, building houses and thinking about me." "Okay, slow down. Start from the beginning. And don't leave out any details. I told her everything, the recognition, the explanation, the way my body had remembered his touch like muscle memory. Rose listened, interjecting with her signature blend of support and skepticism. He better have a damn good explanation for playing dead all these years, she said. And if he hurts you again, I'll fly to Italy myself and drag him back by his fancy architect collar. Her fierce protectiveness made me laugh despite everything. You've never even been to Italy. There's a first time for everything. Seriously, Soph, I'm worried. You've worked so hard to build a stable life. Don't let a ghost pull you under. We talked until past midnight, me pacing the apartment while she alternately cheered and cautioned. Rose knew my history better than anyone. She'd held me through the grief, the divorce, the therapy sessions. What she didn't share was her own pain, struggles with infertility that she buried under work achievements and perfect social media posts. I sensed it sometimes, in the pauses when someone mentioned babies, but she deflected, always focusing on me instead. Promise me you'll be careful, she said before we hung up. I love you too much to watch you break again. My mom, Margaret, was next. I called her the following morning, as I prepared for work, the kitchen light casting long shadows across my untouched breakfast. Mom's 62, widowed for a decade, living in a quaint suburban house with her garden blooming year-round. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm like fresh-baked bread. Honey, what's wrong? You sound different. I told her about Julien, words tumbling out like confessions. She listened quietly, and I could picture her sitting in her sunny breakfast nook, tea growing cold as she absorbed the news. She sighed. Oh, Sophia. Life is too short for chasing shadows. Remember how shattered you were after that storm? You cried for months, barely ate, dropped out of your study program. It took you years to recover. Protect your heart, dear. Some things are better left in the past. Her tone carried the weight of her own regrets, from a marriage to my dad that was dutiful but loveless, built on shared responsibilities rather than passion. She spoke in stories, referencing family lore. Your grandma always said love should lift you, not drown you. She'd seen too many women lose themselves chasing men who brought more chaos than joy. But her words, meant to protect, only strengthened my resolve. I'd spent 16 years playing it safe, choosing stability over passion. Maybe it was time to choose differently. I have to see where this leads, Mom. I can't live wondering, what if, for another 16 years. Then I'll pray for wisdom, she said softly. And that whatever happens, you'll come through it stronger. But despite their warnings, I couldn't stay away. Julien texted me that afternoon, can we meet? There's so much more to say. I understand if you need time, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to prove I'm real. My heart raced reading his words. The day dragged, teaching Romeo and Juliet felt surreal, the kids debating fate versus choice while my own crossroads loomed. During lunch, Tom approached my desk where I sat grading essays with distracted pen strokes. You seem different today, he observed, settling into the empty chair across from me. Tom's 39, a fellow English teacher with kind eyes and an easy smile. He'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago and was raising his teenage daughter alone while navigating his own grief therapy. We'd bonded over shared literature and the unspoken understanding of loss. Different how? I asked, though I suspected I knew. Lighter somehow. Like you've remembered something you'd forgotten. His insight was unsettling and accurate. An old friend came back into my life, I said carefully. It's complicated. He nodded, understanding complicated all too well. Just remember you deserve happiness, Sophia. Don't overthink it to death. After school, I walked to Green Lake, the air crisp with autumn leaves swirling in the wind. The rain had paused, leaving puddles that mirrored the cloudy sky. The park was alive with afternoon activities. Joggers circling the path, children feeding ducks at the water's edge, teenagers playing frisbee on the grass. The normalcy of it all felt surreal against the upheaval in my heart. Julien waited on our agreed bench, 2 coffees in hand. He'd changed into jeans and a gray sweater that brought out his eyes. Seeing him in daylight, outside the charged atmosphere of the cafe, made everything feel more real and more impossible at once. I remembered, extra cream, no sugar, he said, handing me one. The fact that he remembered my coffee preference after 16 years shouldn't have mattered, but it felt like a small miracle. We walked the path that circled the lake, our footsteps finding an easy rhythm like the old days. The conversation flowed more naturally now, the initial shock replaced by genuine curiosity about each other's lives. Tell me about your buildings, I said, wanting to understand this version of him. His face lit up. I specialize in sustainable architecture now. Homes that work with their environment instead of against it. Solar panels that look like art installations, gardens integrated into the structure itself. Every foundation I laid was for stability I never had growing up, but it was empty without you to share it with. I shared pieces of my teaching life, the satisfaction of watching shy students find their voices, the challenge of making centuries-old literature relevant to TikTok generations. I love the moment when they stop seeing Shakespeare as homework and start seeing him as someone who understood their hearts, I said. That's how you always talked about books, he said softly. Like they were people you knew personally. As we walked, physical awareness crept in. The brush of his fingers when he pointed out a particular building's architecture. The way he instinctively walked on the street side of the path, a protective gesture I'd forgotten until it returned. When a cyclist approached, he placed his hand on my lower back to guide me aside, and the simple touch sent heat racing through me. Julien, I stopped walking, turning to face him. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. He nodded, wariness flickering in his eyes. Was there ever a moment, any moment in 16 years, when you wanted to contact me but didn't? When you chose not to reach out? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, yes. Many moments. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I saw a woman with hair like yours on the street. But especially 3 years ago, when Anna left me. I was alone in that big house I'd built, surrounded by all the success I'd thought would fill the emptiness. I had your address, it wasn't hard to find. I wrote you letters I never sent. What did they say? That I was sorry. That not a day passed when I didn't think of you. That if I could go back and choose differently, I would have found a way to take you with me into hiding, or I would have faced the danger and trusted you to face it too. We sat on a bench overlooking the water, watching a family of swans glide past. The late afternoon light painted everything golden, making the moment feel suspended in amber. I kept something, he said quietly, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through photos until he found what he was looking for, then handed it to me. On the screen was a photograph of a sketch, me, sleeping in his Paris bed, hair spread across the pillow, one hand curled under my cheek. I remembered the morning he'd drawn it, how I'd woken to find him studying my face like he was memorizing it. You saved it, I whispered. I saved everything I could. When I built my first house, I hid copies of every sketch, every photo, every letter you wrote me, in the foundation. Like a time capsule. Like proof that what we had was real. The gesture was so romantic and so heartbreaking that I started crying. He pulled me against his chest, and I breathed in that familiar scent, sandalwood and something uniquely him. His arms felt like home, like the place I'd been searching for in every relationship since. Let me help tear down those walls you mentioned, he whispered against my hair. We deserve this chance, Sophia. We've both paid enough for other people's choices. That evening, he walked me home through the gathering dusk. Seattle's lights were beginning to twinkle, shop windows glowing warm against the cooling air. We passed the bookstore where I bought most of my novels, the wine bar where Rose and I had dissected my divorce over too many bottles of Pinot Grigio, the corner where I'd realized my marriage was ending during a particularly brutal argument about whose turn it was to buy groceries. At my building's entrance, we faced the inevitable awkwardness of reunion dating. Were we picking up where we'd left off? Starting over? I unlocked the door, then turned back to him. Would you like to come up? I could make dinner. Nothing fancy, just I'd love to, he said simply. My apartment felt smaller with him in it, his presence filling corners that had been empty for so long. He examined my bookshelves while I puttered in the kitchen, pulling together a simple pasta dinner. I could hear him moving around, occasionally commenting on a title or asking about a particular author. You still have Neruda, he called from the living room. Of course. Love is so short, forgetting is so long. I prefer, I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where. We cooked together, or rather, I cooked while he leaned against the counter, telling me about the markets in Tuscany, the way vendors would shout good-naturedly about the superiority of their tomatoes. His presence in my kitchen felt both natural and surreal, like a dream I was afraid to trust. Over dinner, we talked about smaller things, movies we'd seen, books we'd read, the ways our tastes had evolved. He'd developed a passion for documentaries about climate change. I'd become obsessed with true crime podcasts. Normal getting-to-know-you conversation that felt strange given our history. This is weird, isn't it? I said finally, twirling pasta around my fork. Dating someone I was once ready to marry. Were you? Ready to marry me? The question hung in the air. In Paris, we talked about the future in abstract terms, after graduation, after his architecture degree, someday when we were established adults. But marriage had felt as distant and mythical as retirement. I think I was ready to promise you forever, I said carefully. Whether I understood what that meant, probably not. I bought a ring, he said quietly. The week before the boat trip. A tiny diamond from a pawn shop near the Pantheon. I was going to propose on your birthday. My birthday was in October. The accident had been in August. What happened to it? Lost with everything else. But I remember exactly how it looked, how it felt in my pocket when I carried it around, working up the courage. He smiled sadly. I used to practice the speech in front of my bathroom mirror. Very romantic, talking to my own reflection about spending forever with you. The image made me laugh despite the tears threatening to spill. What would you have said? Probably something embarrassing about how you made me believe in poetry, even though I was studying to build bridges and buildings. How loving you felt like learning a new language that I wanted to speak for the rest of my life. After dinner, he helped me wash dishes, and we moved to the couch with wine. Luna emerged from wherever she'd been hiding and immediately claimed his lap, purring like a tiny engine. She likes you, I observed. Animals and children, he said, scratching behind her ears. They remember me better than I remember myself sometimes. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, a text that made his expression darken briefly before he dismissed it. Everything okay? Work call I need to return later. Nothing urgent. But something in his tone suggested otherwise. I pulled out my record collection, needing the comfort of familiar rituals. He watched me flip through albums with the same focused attention he'd once given his sketches. Play something that reminds you of us, he said. I found our song, the one that had been playing the first time we made love, in his tiny bed with afternoon sunlight streaming through gauze curtains. The vinyl crackled as the needle found its groove, and suddenly we were both 20-something again, breathless with the magnitude of feeling too big for our young bodies. Dance with me, he said, standing and extending his hand. We moved slowly around my small living room, careful not to knock over stacks of books or wake Luna. His hand on my lower back was sure and warm, his other fingers intertwined with mine. We fit together differently now, his shoulders broader, my hips wider, but the rhythm was unchanged. I dreamed about this, he murmured against my temple. Dancing with you again. I never thought. I pulled back to look at his face, searching for the truth behind his words. What happens now, Julien? We can't just pick up where we left off. We're different people. Are we? You still bite your lower lip when you're thinking. You still tilt your head just like that when you're listening to music. You still smell like vanilla and books and something I could never name but would recognize anywhere. His words made me dizzy. I was 41 inches from this man I'd mourned, close enough to count his heartbeats, but 16 years stretched between us like an ocean. I'm scared, I admitted. What if we try this and it ruins the memory? What if the people we are now can't love each other the way the people we were did? Then we'll find out who we are now, he said simply. Together. The kiss started soft, tentative, like a question neither of us was sure we should ask. Then muscle memory took over, and it was desperate, hungry, 16 years of longing compressed into the space between heartbeats. He tasted like wine and memory, like coming home to a place I'd forgotten I'd ever lived. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. I should go, he said, but made no move to leave. You should, I agreed, not wanting him to. I don't want to rush anything. We have time now. Do we? How long are you staying in Seattle? As long as it takes, he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I left my old life in Italy. This time, if you'll let me, I'd like to build something new here. With you. The weight of that commitment terrified and thrilled me. I walked him to the door, and we lingered in the hallway like teenagers reluctant to end a first date. Tomorrow, he asked. Tomorrow, I agreed. But that night, alone in bed with Luna purring beside me, doubts crept in. What did I really know about this man who shared Julien's face and voice but carried 16 years of secrets? How could I trust someone who'd let me believe he was dead, regardless of his reasons? I called in sick again the next day, something my colleagues would definitely notice, and met him for breakfast at a different cafe across town. In daylight, without the charged atmosphere of reunion, I could study him more objectively. The laugh lines around his eyes suggested he'd found moments of happiness in Italy. His hands moved differently when he spoke, more measured, like someone who'd learned to be careful with words. Tell me about your marriage, I said over coffee and croissants that reminded me painfully of Paris mornings. He was quiet for a moment. Anna was a landscape architect. We met when I was designing a house for her sister. She was safe. Predictable. Nothing like the chaos I'd grown up with or the intensity I'd shared with you. Did you love her? I tried to. She deserved love, and I thought maybe if I practiced it enough, it would become real. But she knew. She used to say I made her feel like she was competing with a ghost. The parallel to my own marriage was uncomfortable. Mark had said something similar during our last fight. It's like you're always waiting for someone else to walk through that door. Why did she leave? I built us a beautiful house on a hill overlooking vineyards. Everything she'd said she wanted. But I designed the master bedroom to catch the morning light at exactly the angle it used to hit your face in Paris. The kitchen windows faced east because you always said dawn was your favorite time of day. She realized the house was a shrine to someone else. The admission was devastating and romantic in equal measure. That's not fair to either of you. No, it wasn't. She deserved someone who could love her for herself, not as a placeholder for a memory. And I... He spread jam on his croissant with deliberate care. I deserved the chance to grieve properly instead of building a life around a lie. What lie? That I could forget you. That I could love someone else the same way. That 16 years was enough time to become someone who didn't carry you in every breath. We walked through Pike Place Market after breakfast, navigating the crowds of tourists and locals hunting for the freshest fish and the best flowers. The sensory overload was oddly comforting, the shouts of vendors, the smell of fresh bread and salt water, the colors of autumn produce piled high in bins. I used to come here when I was married, I told him, stopping at a flower vendor's stall. Mark hated it, too crowded, too loud, too unpredictable. But I loved the energy, the way everyone was hunting for something perfect. Julien bought me sunflowers, just like he used to buy me roses from the flower sellers along the Seine. Some things don't change, he said, tucking one behind my ear. That evening, he came to my apartment for dinner again, and this time he helped cook. We made coco vin, a dish that required patience and attention, browning chicken slowly, deglazing the pan with wine, letting flavors meld over time. Working together in the kitchen felt natural, our movements coordinated like dancers who remembered the choreography. I used to cook this for Anna, he admitted, stirring the sauce. She said it was too heavy for Italian summers, but I made it anyway. Now I know why, it was the dish you said you wanted to learn to make someday. These revelations were becoming a pattern, ways his conscious life had been shaped by unconscious memory of me. It was flattering and unsettling, like discovering I'd been haunting someone for 16 years. Over dinner, I told him about my therapy, the work I'd been doing to understand my patterns in relationships. Dr. Harlan says I have an anxious attachment style. That losing you so young taught me to always expect abandonment. Is that why you married Mark? Partly. He was the opposite of you, steady, predictable, present. No passion, but no risk either. I thought that was what I wanted. But it wasn't enough. Safety isn't the same as happiness. I learned that too late to save the marriage, but maybe not too late to save myself. He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. I don't want to be another thing you have to recover from, Sophia. If this is too much, too fast, too complicated. Everything worth having is complicated, I interrupted. I spent 5 years playing it safe, and it nearly killed my soul. Maybe it's time to choose risk. That night, he stayed. Not just for dinner or conversation, but stayed, helped me lock up, brush teeth side by side at the bathroom sink like we'd done it 1,000 times before, settle into bed with Luna curled between us like a furry chaperone. We didn't make love. We were both too aware of the weight of that step, the point of no return it would represent. Instead, we talked in the dark about smaller things, his favorite project, a school in Tuscany with walls that changed color with the seasons, my worst teaching day, the time I cried in front of 30 sophomores during a lesson on tragedy, the dreams we'd had for each other all these years. I used to imagine you teaching somewhere, he said, his voice soft in the darkness. Standing in front of a classroom, making literature come alive for kids who thought books were boring. I was right about that. I used to imagine you building beautiful things. Homes where families would be happy, where children would learn to love architecture by living in it. I guess I was right too. In the morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of him moving quietly in the kitchen. He'd managed to find ingredients for French toast, and served it to me in bed with a single sunflower in a water glass. I could get used to this, I said, cutting into the perfectly golden bread. I hope you do, he replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. I've had 16 years of mornings without you. I don't want to waste any more. The domesticity felt both natural and surreal. We were playing house, trying on the life we might have had if the storm hadn't taken it away. But underneath the comfort was a current of uncertainty. Could we really build something new on the foundation of something so broken? That morning, reality intruded in the form of Rose appearing at my door unannounced, armed with coffee and the determined expression she wore when she decided to stage an intervention. Okay, she said, brushing past me into the apartment where Julien sat reading my newspaper in his clothes from yesterday. We need to talk. Julien stood politely, extending his hand. You must be Rose. Sophia's told me so much about you. Rose shook his hand but didn't smile. All good things, I hope. Unlike what I planned to tell her about you. Rose, I warned. No, let her, Julien said calmly. She's protecting you. I respect that. Rose studied him like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. You're really him. The dead French guy. Not French, he corrected mildly. And obviously not dead. Right. Just missing for 16 years while she mourned you, married someone else, and rebuilt her entire life around the fact that you were gone. No big deal. The tension in my living room was thick enough to cut. I stepped between them. Rose, I know you're worried. Damn right I'm worried. Do you know what you were like after Paris? You didn't eat for weeks. You failed half your classes. You moved back in with your mom and spent 6 months in bed. It took years of therapy to put you back together. I know. I was there. And now he just walks back into your life and you're calling in sick to work and making French toast like the last 16 years never happened? Julien cleared his throat. May I say something? Rose crossed her arms. This should be good. You're right to protect her. What I did, disappearing, letting her think I was dead. It was cowardly and selfish. I told myself I was keeping her safe, but really, I was taking the easy way out. I was 24 and scared, and I made a choice that hurt the person I loved most in the world. Rose's expression didn't soften. And now? Now I'm 40 and still scared, but I'm here because I want to make different choices. Better ones. If Sophia will let me. It's not up to me, Rose said finally. But hurt her again, and I'll make sure they never find your body. Despite everything, Julien smiled. I'd expect nothing less from someone who loves her. After Rose left, but not before making me promise to call her every day, Julien and I sat on the couch in the aftermath of her protective storm. She's terrifying, he observed. She's wonderful. And she's right to be suspicious. She is. So are you, if you are. I studied his profile, looking for cracks in the facade. I want to trust this. Trust you. But I'm 40, not 22. I can't just follow my heart without engaging my brain. Then what does your brain tell you? That this is insane. That people don't just come back from the dead and pick up where they left off. That even if you are who you say you are, we don't really know each other anymore. That building a relationship on shared history is like building a house on sand. All true, he agreed. What else? That I've spent 16 years being careful, making safe choices, protecting myself from exactly this kind of disruption. And I've been miserable. Also true. That maybe some things are worth the risk. Maybe some people are worth the risk. He turned to face me fully. Am I? It was the essential question, the one that would determine everything that came next. Looking at him, this man who carried the face of my first love but the wisdom of someone who'd lived through loss and mistake and regret, I felt something shift inside me. Not the desperate, all-consuming passion of youth, but something steadier. More intentional. I think so, I said. I think you might be worth everything, but even as the words left my lips, his phone buzzed again with another text that made his jaw tighten. Whatever he was hiding, it was getting harder to ignore. Julien, what aren't you telling me? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. There are some complications with my life in Italy. Legal things I need to resolve before I can make a clean start here. What kind of legal things? Property disputes. Contract issues. Nothing criminal, he added quickly, seeing my expression. Just messy. The kind of mess that follows you when you've lived under an assumed identity for 16 years. The revelation was like cold water thrown on the warm bubble we'd been living in. How messy? Messy enough that I might need to go back to Italy to resolve it. Soon. For how long? I don't know. Maybe a few weeks. Maybe longer. The familiar fear rose in my chest, the certainty that anyone I loved would inevitably leave. So this is it? You reappear after 16 years, we have a few perfect days, and then you disappear again? It's not like that. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like that. We argued then, voices raised for the first time since his return. All the hurt and fear I'd been pushing down erupted in accusations and tears. He tried to explain, to reassure, but I was beyond reasoning. You know what the worst part is? I said finally, when we were both exhausted from fighting. It's not that you might leave. It's that I knew you would, and I let myself hope anyway. He left that night without staying for dinner, without kissing me goodbye, without promising to call. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the detritus of our abbreviated reunion, his coffee cup in the sink, the sunflower wilting on my nightstand, the lingering scent of his cologne on my couch. Luna curled in my lap, purring comfort, and I cried until there were no tears left. Then I pulled out my phone and did what I always did in crisis, called Rose. I told you so seems inadequate, she said when I'd finished explaining. You were right. I was stupid to think this could work. Maybe. Or maybe you're both just scared and acting like idiots. Hard to tell from here. Whose side are you on? Yours. Always yours. But that doesn't mean I want you to give up on something that might be real just because it's hard. The next few days passed in a blur of normal routine that felt anything but normal. I returned to work, facing concerned questions from colleagues who'd noticed my absences. Tom was particularly solicitous, bringing me coffee during breaks and offering to take over my after-school tutoring duties. "You seem like you're going through something," he said one afternoon as we graded papers in the empty staff room. "If you want to talk." I found myself telling him about Julien, not everything, but enough to explain my distraction. Tom listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "So he's the one who got away," Tom said finally. "Something like that. And now he's back, but maybe not for long. That's the situation." Tom was quiet for a moment, focusing intently on a student essay about Hamlet's madness. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" "Sure. Don't make his choice for him. If he's going to leave, let him be the one to do it. But don't push him away just to prove you were right to be scared." His wisdom surprised me. Tom had loved and lost too, his wife to cancer, their dreams of growing old together to an enemy they couldn't fight. If anyone understood the fear of loving someone who might leave, it was him. "What if I get hurt again?" "Then you get hurt. But what if you don't? What if this time, the story has a different ending?" That night, Julien texted me, "I have something to show you. Can we meet?" Despite everything, the fight, the fear, my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at the lake where we'd walked our first day together. The evening was crisp and clear, the water reflecting the lights of the city like scattered stars. He was waiting with a manila folder and an expression I couldn't read. "These are the papers from Italy," he said without preamble, handing me the folder. "Everything I've been dealing with. I thought you should see them before you decide whether I'm worth trusting." Inside were legal documents in Italian and English, property deeds, contract agreements, correspondence with lawyers. It took me a while to understand what I was looking at, but gradually, the picture emerged. Julien Moreau owned several properties in Tuscany, including the architectural firm he'd built from nothing. But the identity was fraudulent, built on forged papers and assumed documents. Now, 16 years later, the Italian government was investigating. He faced possible deportation, definitely legal proceedings, potentially criminal charges. "The house I built, the one Anna left, it's being seized pending the investigation," he said as I read. "My business, my accounts, everything I've built there is frozen." "So you came here because you had nowhere else to go?" "No." The sharpness in his voice made me look up. "I came here because I chose you over all of it. I could have stayed and fought, hired better lawyers, probably kept most of my assets. Instead, I liquidated what I could, handed over what I couldn't, and bought a plane ticket to Seattle." "Why?" "Because 16 years ago, I chose fear over love, safety over truth. I chose to let you think I was dead rather than risk bringing danger to your life. Every day since then has been a consequence of that choice. This time, I wanted to choose differently." The documents painted a picture of a man walking away from everything he'd built to come back to a woman who might not want him. It was either deeply romantic or deeply stupid, possibly both. What happens if you go back to Italy? Prison, maybe. Deportation, certainly. And years of legal battles to prove that Julien Moreau was a necessity, not a crime. And if you stay here? I start over. Again. At 40, with nothing but the clothes I brought and whatever skills I can sell. No legal status, no official identity in the US, no guarantee that Julien Dubois isn't wanted for something too. The weight of what he was offering, what he was sacrificing, settled over me like snow. He was giving up his entire life for the possibility that we might have a future together. "That's a lot to put on someone," I said quietly. "It is. Too much, maybe. If you tell me to go, I'll understand." We sat in silence, watching a jogger circle the lake path, her reflective gear blinking in the dusk. A family of ducks paddle past, the babies trailing their mother in perfect formation. Normal life continuing around the small drama of our reunion. I need to ask you something, I said finally. And I need you to be completely honest. He nodded. Are you here because you love me, or because I'm the only safe harbor you have left? The question hung between us like a bridge we both had to choose whether to cross. He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Both, he said finally. I won't lie to you anymore, Sophia. Yes, I needed somewhere to go when my life in Italy fell apart. Yes, you represent safety and home and a chance to become who I was before everything went wrong. But I chose to come here instead of running somewhere else because 16 years haven't changed the fact that you're the person I want to build a life with. If you were married, if you were happy, if you'd told me to leave that first day in the cafe, I would have respected that and figured something else out. But you're not, and you didn't, and I'm hoping that means something. It means I'm as scared as you are, I said. It means I've been half alive for 16 years, and seeing you again reminded me what it feels like to be whole. And I think maybe that's worth fighting for. Even if we don't know how it ends. He exhaled, a sound that might have been relief or resignation. So what do? We figure it out. Together. One day at a time. It wasn't the sweeping romantic declaration of youth, but it felt more honest. More real. We were two middle-aged people with complicated histories and uncertain futures, choosing to build something together despite the odds. That night, he came home with me, not as a guest or a visitor, but as someone who belonged. We made dinner together, did dishes together, watched a movie with Luna sprawled across both our laps. Ordinary domestic life that felt extraordinary because we'd thought it was impossible. I love you, he said as we were getting ready for bed, the words casual and profound at the same time. I love you too, I replied, and meant it in a way that was both exactly the same as 16 years ago and completely different. We made love that night, slowly, carefully, like we were learning each other's bodies for the first time. In some ways, we were. We were different people now, marked by loss and time and the choices that had brought us back to this moment. But underneath the changes, the connection was unchanged. The way our bodies fit together, the rhythm we found, the sense of coming home to ourselves through each other. Afterward, lying in the dark with his arm around me and Luna purring at the foot of the bed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete peace. Not the absence of problems, we had plenty of those to solve, but the presence of rightness. The sense that whatever came next, we would face it together. What happens now? I asked, echoing the question that had haunted us since that first morning in the cafe. Now we build something new, he said against my hair. Together. Whatever that looks like. Outside, Seattle rain began to fall, not the angry storm of our past, but the gentle, persistent drizzle that nourishes rather than destroys. I listened to it tap against the windows like a lullaby, and for the first time in 16 years, I fell asleep without fear. The future was uncertain. There would be visa applications and legal complications, career decisions and family integration, the 1,000 small negotiations that turned two separate lives into one shared story. But we had time now, not the stolen moments of youth, but the deliberate choice of adults who knew the value of what they'd found. It's all coming back to me now, not just the memory of who we were, but the possibility of who we might become together. This is my story, how I married a dead man who died 16 years ago. Thank you for listening.
If this story awakened something in your heart that you thought was lost forever, please hit that like button and share it with someone who's forgotten that love can return when we least expect it. Your support doesn't just help these stories reach more hearts, it helps lonely souls remember they're not alone in their second chances. Subscribe and ring that notification bell for more true love stories that prove fairy tales can happen at any age, in any season of life. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a love you thought was lost forever? Did you get your second chance, or are you still waiting for yours? Don't forget to follow for daily doses of hope, healing, and the kind of love stories that remind us why we never stop believing in forever. Sweet dreams, and may your own love story be writing itself even now. Red Heart.